It started like any other Thursday morning in Charlotte. Blue skies, clean sidewalks, and the hum of morning traffic. Inside the Magnolia Women's Center, everything gleamed. Glass walls, white tile floors, and silence so polished it felt like luxury itself. But that illusion cracked the moment Ava Monroe walked in. 6 months pregnant, radiant and composed, she was met not with kindness, but with cold stares and clipped words. No one said anything outright. They didn't have to. The receptionist barely looked up. Other patients pulled their belongings closer. Ava didn't flinch. She'd been here before, not the building, but the feeling. The sense that she was being judged for existing in a place someone decided she didn't belong. She wasn't here for a fight, just a scan, a picture of her baby. What no one knew, not the staff, not the doctor, not even the guards, was that Ava's husband was already on his way. Ava Monroe stood on the edge of the clinic's marble entrance, one hand resting on her belly, the other clutching the strap of her worn canvas bag. She had dressed with quiet intention that morning, a soft cream sweater, loose-fitting maternity jeans, and clean sneakers. Not flashy, not frumpy, just simple and neat. Her car was parked 2 blocks away because the clinic only validated valet service. She'd walked the rest of the way, ignoring the way passers-by glanced, hesitated, and kept going. She was used to that. At 34, Ava had learned how to carry herself like she belonged everywhere, even in spaces that tried to tell her otherwise. She'd spent 10 years in public education, taught hundreds of students, written grants, led workshops, and still, here she was, preparing herself for another room, another performance. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Cool air washed over her, along with the scent of orchids and sanitizer. At the reception desk, she gave her name calmly, her voice pleasant but precise. Ava Monroe, 10:30 appointments with Dr. Whitaker. The receptionist nodded without smiling, slid a clipboard forward and went back to her screen. Ava took it, turned, and sat near the corner of the waiting room. The chairs were plush, the lighting soft, but nothing felt warm. Eyes flicked toward her, then away. Ava focused on the form. Insurance, allergies, due date. Simple questions. But as she filled in each box, she could feel the weight in the room shifting against her. The door to exam room 4 creaked open with a soft, controlled hush, and in stepped Dr. Valerie Whitaker. Early 50s, tall, thin. Every movement she made seemed rehearsed. Her lab coat was spotless, her hair pinned into a flawless twist, her heels clicking softly against the tile floor. No greeting, no smile, just a long, assessing stare that traveled from Ava's face to her belly, then down to the modest flats on her feet. Ava Monroe? The doctor asked, voice clipped like she was reading a name off a list she didn't want to be holding. Ava sat straighter on the edge of the table. Yes, that's me. Dr. Whitaker didn't respond. She turned her back, adjusting equipment on the counter with methodical precision. The room buzzed with a silence that wasn't accidental. Ava watched, waiting for some acknowledgement, but it didn't come. Finally, she spoke. I believe we're doing the ultrasound today. The doctor gave a small, almost imperceptible sigh, then nodded without turning around. You came alone. Not a question. A statement wrapped in judgment. Ava's voice was steady. My husband's meeting me here. He got called into court this morning. Another pause. Then, as if sharing a thought she meant to keep private, the doctor murmured, Figures. Ava blinked. Excuse me. Dr. Whitaker finally turned, folding her arms. Nothing. Let's begin. Her tone was brisk, bordering on dismissive. She squirted gel onto the wand and pressed it hard against Ava's stomach. No warning, no apology. Ava winced but said nothing. The monitor flickered to life. Dr. Whitaker tilted her head at the screen, but didn't share what she saw. No soft remarks, no words of excitement, just silence. Ava turned her eyes toward the wall, blinking against the sting rising behind them. This was supposed to be a joyful moment, a milestone, but it felt clinical, detached, cold. A full minute passed. Then Dr. Whitaker spoke again, this time with a sharper edge. You say your husband's on his way. What does he do? Ava hesitated. He's a federal attorney, Civil Rights Division. The doctor paused. For a moment, just one, her posture stiffened. Then she smiled, small, fake, practiced. How noble. Ava didn't reply. The doctor turned back to the machine. Most people don't appreciate what this clinic offers, she added, her voice coated in implication. We're selective about our patients. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ava felt the message under every syllable. She didn't belong here. Not really. She was merely tolerated. And that tolerance was wearing thin. Ava wiped the gel from her stomach in silence, reaching for the paper towels without waiting to be offered any. Dr. Whitaker had already turned her back, busying herself with files on the counter, like Ava wasn't still in the room. The ultrasound had been rushed. No images printed, no heartbeat shared. Just a cool flick of the wrist and a murmur that everything looked fine. Ava stood slowly, one hand on her belly, the other gathering her bag. She wanted to leave, wanted to breathe air that didn't feel heavy with dismissal. But before she could take a step, the doctor's voice rang out behind her. One moment. Where's my bracelet? Ava turned. What? Dr. Whitaker gestured to the small tray near the exam table. My Cartier bangle. Platinum. It was right there when I walked in. Ava stared at the tray, confusion tightening her throat. I haven't touched anything. The doctor crossed her arms. You were alone in here. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried a sharpness that echoed. Ava blinked, stunned. You think I stole it? I think we need to be cautious, she replied, already reaching for the phone. I'll have security handle it. Ava's mouth went dry. This is insane. I came in for a checkup. The doctor didn't flinch. And now we're missing property. As the call connected, Ava felt the floor tilt beneath her. Not because she was guilty, but because she knew what came next. It wasn't about a bracelet. It never was. It was about the ease with which she could be turned into a suspect, the speed with which suspicion found her skin, and how, once it did, there would be no reasoning it away. 2 security officers arrived less than 5 minutes later. No sirens, no shouting, just the steady thump of shoes on tile and a quiet word from the front desk. Ava was still standing in the exam room, arms folded across her belly, her breath steady but tight. The younger officer, broad-shouldered and chewing gum like it was a job, stepped in first. The other, older and thinner, followed with a clipboard in hand and a calm voice that didn't feel calming at all. Miss Monroe, we've had a report of missing property. We'd like you to come with us while we look into it. Ava blinked. I didn't take anything. I haven't even moved from this spot. The older one nodded slowly, like he'd heard that line 100 times before. This is just standard, ma'am. We need to ask a few questions, away from the medical area. Ava hesitated. I'm pregnant. My husband is on his way. I need to speak with him before I go anywhere. The younger officer didn't even blink. You'll have a chance to make a call after we process the report. Process the report, Ava echoed, her voice cracking at the edges. I didn't do anything wrong. Neither of them responded. The older one held the door open. Let's keep this simple. Ava looked from the 2 men to the door and back again. Every fiber in her body told her not to go. But every lesson she had learned in moments like this, at school board meetings, at traffic stops, in department stores, told her to stay calm. Don't escalate. Don't resist. Just get through it. She exhaled slowly, then stepped out. Her heels clicked softly against the linoleum as she followed them through a hallway she'd never noticed before. Narrower, dimmer, stripped of the clinic's polished charm. No windows, just buzzing lights overhead and cold gray walls on either side. It felt like the heartbeat of the building, hidden from the rest of the world, a place designed to keep things quiet. Ava walked with her chin up, her hands clenched gently over the curve of her belly, wondering how many women had walked this same hallway, wondering how many had kept walking without anyone ever hearing a word. The room they brought her to barely deserved the name. It was more of a storage cell than an office. No windows, no artwork, just a metal desk, 2 plastic chairs, and a wall-mounted monitor that flickered like it had been tired for years. Ava sat stiffly, adjusting her maternity jeans beneath her coat. Her palms were damp. Her breath was shallow. The younger officer stood by the door, arms crossed, chewing the same gum like it was the only sound allowed. The older one sat across from her, pen in hand, eyes scanning a form. "We're just gathering information," he said, tone flat. "Routine protocol." Ava nodded slowly. "Then I'd like to call my husband." The younger one stepped forward. "We'll hold your phone until this is over." He reached into her bag, pulled it out, and dropped it into the desk drawer like it was evidence. Ava's voice tightened. "I haven't done anything wrong. You're treating me like a criminal." Neither answered. The monitor on the wall showed grainy footage from various hallway cameras, all in black and white. One view showed the corridor outside her exam room. She leaned forward. "There, that feed. You'll see I never touched anything." The older officer barely glanced up. "We'll review it later." He scribbled something on the form. Ava looked around the room. No clock, no visible exits. Just that faint electrical hum. Her baby shifted inside her, a soft flutter beneath her ribs. She closed her eyes, counting her breath in fours, the way her therapist had taught her. In through the nose. Hold. Out through the mouth. Stay grounded. Stay sane. Every second dragged like an hour. She thought of Jordan, what he would say when he found out. Not if, when, because she knew he'd come. He always did. What they didn't know, couldn't know, was that the calm she held on to wasn't weakness. It was discipline. It was fired with the lid on. And once it came off, nothing would be the same. Jordan Monroe stepped through the front doors of Magnolia Women's Center with the kind of presence that turned heads without a sound. His charcoal gray suit was crisp, his black shoes polished to a mirror shine, and the federal badge clipped to his belt glinted beneath the overhead lights. His eyes didn't search. They locked. He walked straight to the reception desk, voice low but unmistakably firm. "I'm looking for Ava Monroe. She had a 10:30 with Dr. Whitaker." The receptionist's mouth opened, then paused mid-breath. She hesitated just long enough to give herself away. "She's not in the exam room anymore. There was an incident." Jordan's voice didn't rise. "Where is she?" "Security has her downstairs," she stammered. "It's being handled." He held out his ID. "U.S. Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division. Show me." She blinked, nodded, and pointed toward a side hallway. Jordan was already moving. Down the corridor, past frosted glass doors and muted conversations, he reached the elevator and hit the button hard. When the doors opened to the lower level, he stepped into silence. Sterile walls, humming lights, the kind of place meant to keep things hidden. He found the room without asking, just followed the sound of his instincts and the faint murmur behind a steel door. He opened it without knocking. Ava looked up, her face a blend of exhaustion and quiet strength. The officers froze. "Can we help you?" the younger one asked, trying to sound in control. Jordan didn't answer. He stepped beside his wife and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You all right?" She nodded once. He turned to the men. "You're detaining a pregnant woman without evidence, without counsel, and without access to her phone?" The younger guard started to speak, but Jordan raised a finger. "Save it. I want the footage, the report, and the name of whoever approved this nonsense. Now!" The room went still. The older guard moved first, mumbling something about procedure. Jordan didn't blink. "If you're going to cite policy, make sure it aligns with federal law. Otherwise, this becomes a bigger problem than you're prepared to handle." Ava sat taller now, her hands resting calmly over her belly. She didn't need to speak. Her silence said enough. Her strength, finally seen, filled the room with a force no badge could contain. The shift had begun, and no one in that room would forget it. The older officer led Jordan and Ava into a separate monitoring room, its walls lined with blinking screens and dated equipment. The air smelled faintly of old coffee and cold electronics. Jordan crossed his arms, standing tall behind the desk as the guard pulled up footage from the hallway outside exam room 4. "You'll see she never touched the tray," Jordan said calmly, his voice carrying more weight than volume. The screen showed Ava entering the room, her hands at her sides, her body language cautious. At no point did she approach the counter. No grabbing, no slipping anything into her bag. "Pause it there," Jordan instructed. The image froze on the silver tray, bracelet still in place. "Roll forward." They did. The footage showed Dr. Whitaker entering after Ava left, checking her wrist, then frowning and walking out quickly. A cleaning staff member appeared moments later, moping around the exam table, never touching the tray. "Where's the next camera angle?" Jordan asked. The officer hesitated. "That area doesn't have coverage. It cuts off during the shift change." Jordan raised an eyebrow. "So let me get this straight. You detained a pregnant woman on a theft accusation with no evidence, no witness, and now conveniently, no full footage?" The guard swallowed hard. "It was protocol." "No," Jordan said, cold and certain. "It was profiling." He turned toward Ava and opened the drawer to retrieve her phone. He powered it back on and placed it gently in her hands. "You're going to write down everyone who touched this report, everyone who backed this action, and then you're going to step aside." The officer nodded, pen already trembling in his grip. Ava stood slowly, stretching her back, her fingers gripping the phone like it anchored her to something real. She glanced at the screen, missed texts, a voicemail from her sister, and a message from her husband, time-stamped 15 minutes earlier. "I'm on my way." Her eyes met Jordan's. "Let's go upstairs." He nodded once. "Time to speak to someone in charge." As they walked back toward the elevator, each step echoed louder than the last. The silence in the hallway wasn't just quiet anymore. I was nervous, a shift in the air, like the building itself understood it had underestimated who had walked through its doors. The conference room on the top floor was nothing like the rest of the building. Sleek glass walls, polished wood table, bottled water lined up in perfect rows. But beneath the shine was tension you could feel without touching. Ava sat at the far end, her back straight, her hands resting on the curve of her belly. Jordan stood beside her, silent but steady. Across from them sat the clinic's medical director, a senior administrator, in Dr. Whitaker, arms crossed, face tight, jaw set like stone. The director cleared his throat and gestured toward the monitor as the surveillance footage began to play. Everyone watched as Ava entered the room, followed protocol, and never touched the tray. Then the doctor walked in alone, realized the bracelet was missing, and left. Not once did Ava approach the counter. Not once did she move toward the items in question. When the video ended, the room fell silent. Jordan broke it with a voice that cut clean through. "You accused my wife without evidence. You detained her without cause. And you did it because you saw what you wanted to see. Not the truth, just your bias dressed up as concern." Dr. Whitaker opened her mouth, but the administrator raised her hand. "We've seen enough," he said quietly. Ava leaned forward. "I came here to check on my baby. I left with my dignity questioned, my voice ignored, and my safety disregarded. That's not just a mistake. That's harmful." No one in the room disagreed. They didn't have the words for it, but they understood they'd just watched the truth, unfiltered, undeniable, and there was no taking it back. The fallout came quickly, not with fanfare, but with quiet urgency. Within 48 hours, Dr. Whitaker was placed on administrative leave, pending an internal review. The clinic released a carefully worded statement citing a failure to adhere to patient care standards, though everyone knew what that meant. Behind the scenes, staff were called into meetings, legal counsel was consulted, and protocols were rewritten from the ground up. Ava's experience had triggered more than a policy review. It had opened a door no one at Magnolia could quietly shut again. Jordan filed a formal civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice, backed by video evidence, signed witness statements, and a public request for accountability. The story gained traction, first in local media, then through national platforms. Patients began sharing their own experiences under the hashtag #AvaDeservesBetter, each one echoing the same sentiment. This wasn't an isolated event. It was a pattern. Ava didn't ask for any of it. She hadn't wanted attention, but when it came, she faced it with the same calm she'd carried into that exam room, the kind that speaks louder than outrage ever could. What happened to her was wrong, but what followed, policy changes, public scrutiny, and a renewed demand for equity in healthcare, was proof that silence wouldn't have protected her. Her story had become more than one woman's fight. It had become a mirror held up to an entire system. And this time, the system had no choice but to look back. 2 weeks later, Ava stood on the steps outside Magnolia Women's Center, a small podium in front of her, microphones angled toward her face, cameras flashing in the midday sun. She wore a pale blue dress, her hand resting over the child she still carried, her other hand steady on the podium edge. Jordan stood just behind her, not as a shield but as support, his presence quiet and firm. Ava didn't speak with anger. She didn't need to. Her voice was measured, clear, the kind that made people stop scrolling and start listening. What happened to me wasn't about one bracelet or one doctor, she said. It was about assumptions, the kind that are made before a word is spoken, before a name is even read. She paused, letting the weight settle. But what came after? That matters more. I believed. I was protected. And now I am heard. The crowd behind the camera stood in silence, some with arms crossed, some with eyes misting. She looked down briefly, then up again. This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who's been made to feel small in a space that should have cared for her. Every Black mother who's walked into a room and walked out less than whole. She exhaled softly, her eyes scanning the faces in front of her. We deserve better, and starting today, we demand it. With that, she stepped away from the mic, placed both hands gently on her belly, and smiled. Not because the battle was over, but because she knew she hadn't fought it alone. What happened to Ava is not just a story, it's a reminder that dignity should never depend on how someone looks, where they come from, or whether they walk in alone. Bias, when left unchecked, becomes policy. Silence, when accepted, becomes complicity. But truth, when spoken clearly, changes. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Let it spark a conversation, not just about race or healthcare, but about basic human respect. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow for more stories that matter, because the more we listen, the more we grow, and the more we stand together.